True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. You know, I've been excited about this show for going on over a week. Dale Lundberg shows us or joins us. He was a homicide detective in Dallas for about 10 years, robbery detective before that. I believe their robbery unit actually handled kidnapping type complaints, but we're going to talk to him in detail about that. This is a veteran guy who I love him because he's not only smart, but he's kind of salty and he just tells it the way it is. Couldn't have a better guest on today to talk about Nancy Guthrie. Nancy Guthrie, who again was taken in the dead of night on the 1st of February. And so we're going to continue talking about that. And I'm not going to take any longer, but I just want to invite our 48 hours. I don't want to call him a star, but let's just say featured in the next 48 for so long, Dale Lundberg to the stage. And there he is, Mr. Clean.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, it's great to see you, Dale.
It's great to see you, and hello, true crimers.
There we go. I love it. All right. So I want to get right in and talk about Nancy Guthrie. I want to know, what was your very first reaction when you heard about this case?
When I first heard about the case, I was up in Wisconsin visiting family, and when it came on the news, at first I thought, okay, is this going to be the most likely scenario, which is a person who wandered off or just went somewhere and the family didn't know about it and couldn't get a hold of her. But then you start seeing reports of the blood being found. And then days later, the ransom notes that are sent to the various organizations. And right away you realized, okay, this isn't just a case of somebody who went voluntarily missing, but was accosted by someone or some persons.
And so, Dale, when you say someone or some persons, I know you've seen the footage. I'm going to put it up on the stage right now of who I've called from the get-go porch guy and how he's kind of rigged out. When you saw these videos, what struck you about two different areas? One, the clarity and the detail, and two, what that detail told you.
Well, the first thing that it told me was that robbery was not the intent, because he's going there with a full backpack. When it shows him turning, his backpack isn't empty. His backpack is stuffed with stuff, and makes you wonder, okay, what's in there? What little kit did he put together to help facilitate his commission of this kidnapping offense? Is it ropes? Is it a body bag to put her in so that she can't resist? And really, that was about it. The person definitely came there prepared.
Did anything strike you about his holster and the way it was literally over his fly outside? The gun didn't fit. It was definitely not struck you about that?
Okay, well, the first thing that struck me is, one, most thugs don't use holsters. I have arrested and participated or assisted in the arresting of literally thousands of people in all kinds of circumstances. And it's maybe only in one or two circumstances that I've ever come across somebody who actually had a holster for their pistol, because usually it's just tucked into their pants. I even talked with undercover people, and one of the things that they comment on all the time is, if you see somebody with a holster, you might want to wonder if they're another undercover cop. Because, officers and civilians who shoot a lot are really the only people who use holsters regularly. but he's also carrying it in what I would consider a very inconvenient place.
I like that term, inconvenient. Yes, it is most inconvenient. Um, so when you saw that, did it make you think that he had a law enforcement or military background, or kind of a wannabe? What were your thoughts there?
Well, it made me think that it's probably somebody who is experienced in shooting, probably put it at that location because he has other things on his body that it would get interfered with if it were more off to the side. And really, that's all it told me. If he was truly military, I think he would have more of a vest rig or shoulder rig because that's where most military people carry their pistols now. And if it's not on a vest or shoulder rig, then it's on one of those thigh holsters that are well below the waistband. So by looking at that, I would not say that it's necessarily military or police, but somebody who is experienced enough with firearms where he's more comfortable carrying it in a holster than just shoving it into his waistband like most thugs do.
You know, you, I think, are the first one to come forward and say that. I cannot wait to post about that because you bring up such an interesting point to me that really makes me think now about that aspect. I really thought it was somebody that was very much sort of a wannabe and, prepared. But I like the point you make that if it's a real thug, this is really unusual. So does it drive you away from that premise that some have had that it's a gang, somebody really affiliated with a gang?
Uh, it could be somebody who's affiliated with a gang, but it's somebody who's probably graduated up from your typical street gang and somebody who's moved up a level or two where they're no longer engaged in your normal everyday street crimes. Uh, but that's really all I could say. I don't think it's a street level thug at all because they just don't carry holsters.
And what about, did you make anything about this Walmart backpack, who now we know, even though it's only made by Walmart and sold by Walmart, obviously it could have been a secondhand, it could have been given to him, something like that. And then his other attire, which many believe is sold by Walmart, but sold by a lot of people. That law enforcement hasn't said the particular make of the pants, the shoes, the mask, even the holster, none of it, other than online sleuths and others have found similar clothing sold at Walmart. Did you make much of the clothing, and do you think it could ever be a good lead?
Uh, Eventually, you're going to have the only thing the clothes are really going to tell you is it's going to help confirm that that's the person when you eventually find him. Because when you execute the search warrant, one of the things that's going to be in your search warrant are not only evidence such as biological material that may be on something, ropes, weapons, guns, but you're also going to put in a description of the clothing that you know was worn. So if you find clothing like that, you can seize that and say, hey, see, this is the pair of pants he was wearing. We know this is him. But I'm surprised nobody said that he has to be a ski bum because, well, in Yuma, there's not much cause for wearing a mask like that.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, except for there's a big use for that mask if you're going to start kidnapping people, I suppose.
Yes.
So there has been a lot made of the fact that he grabbed this shrubbery. So, and you know what, Dale, you've seen the footage, correct? The full
Yes.
of it, if you haven't. Okay, good. So he walks up and he has his head down, almost just straight down to the ground. And he walks over to that camera and he extends his arm up as if to cover the lens. And then it's almost like he doesn't think that's enough for some reason. And then he turns back and starts perusing in the shrubbery and then pulls some shrubbery up and then extends it toward the camera with this light in his mouth. What did you make of all of that?
I just thought it was odd. I thought maybe he was looking for something that he could put over where if somebody was inside and happened to look at the camera, they wouldn't think that somebody disabled the camera, but like a small branch or leaves had covered it.
That is so interesting because we don't really see a lot that happens after this. In other words, I wondered if he was able to in some way tuck it in around the camera. And for me, I just never understood why. And I guess this is back to the fact this isn't your normal thug, wouldn't grab a rock and just attempt to crash that or just keep his hand up over it as he unscrewed it and took it out. So
I know it's weird.
do you
It
think
actually
it's
is. It's weird.
some level of expertise here, shows patience, that sort of thing?
Uh, more along the lines of just not doing what would be easiest, which would be to do the truly thuggish thing, which is just knock the camera down and disable it. It's to me, it's more like he's trying to have it so that if somebody does look out, they believe that the thing is just obscured by, you know, the leaves that are outside that may have fallen down.
And did it strike you that that was a second, like he had this brainstorm as he walked up? Because on his way in, if that was his purpose, he would have just snagged those flowers, this heather. A lot of people think it's heather, but whatever it is, he would have snagged that on the way, knowing that was his plan. For me, it's hard for me to, it's incongruent that he has this plan, but he sort of thinks of it at the time. But maybe it was just an afterthought.
Yeah. Or maybe he thought there were plants near the camera that he could grab, and maybe a potted plant or something that he was planning on using had been moved. Or he could have just forgot, oh, I was going to do this and I got to go back and grab this. Because you got to remember, he's under a bit of stress at that moment because he's doing something, that's very serious. And you and I both know when you're going to do something uh, and you're under a lot of stress, sometimes you might forget a little detail that you had planned on doing, which is why most of us have rituals. Like always check this, always check this, always check this. Before I do this, I always do this to make sure that nothing is forgotten.
And what about this whole mouth flashlight that he used? Have you seen that in your detective work? Obviously, it was so he could have both of his hands free. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I thought, if he was more prepared, why wouldn't he have one of those visor headlamps? To me, it was odd that he used a mouth light, and it actually made me think of an old Rammstein video.
What do you mean by Ramstein video?
Okay, I'm going to snitch myself off. My favorite musical group in the world is Rammstein. And in one of the videos that Rammstein does during a live performance, Till Lindemann, the lead singer, has a light that's in his mouth that you see only when he opens his mouth.
Wow, that's really interesting.
They're a crazy group, but I like them.
What kind of music is that?
Neue Deutsches Hart, German hard rock.
Wow, very interesting. Well,
You've probably heard the song, and the song most people know by Rammstein is Du hast. It was big back in the 90s or early 2000s.
it just makes me wonder, as you said, why wouldn't he have a headlamp or even on his the backpack? a light there that you could just press. I mean, there's so many options, but the fact that he chose
Yes.
to use this, it made me wonder about his thoughts about DNA, because when you have your mouth open like that, you just naturally salivate and you could really risk
Yes.
the saliva being found, although they didn't take the mat, which I'm going to get into with you. But did this make you think maybe this guy, he's all covered up, he seems prepared, but yet he's willing to risk that saliva getting out?
Yeah, or it could be that he's like me and extremely cheap and thrifty. And if you don't have a headlamp, but you have a small light that you can hold in your mouth while you're working, and it's something that you're used to doing anyway, like a lot of, mechanics, before headlamps came out, would hold small flashlights in their mouth. Could be he figured I've already got this little flashlight that I've used before like this. Rather than go buy a headlamp, I'm going to be cheap and just use this.
It also made me wonder if he was just comfortable with that. Like that was normal to him, and that could be a clue to
Yes,
investigators. You're looking for somebody that would use that, like you mentioned, a mechanic.
yes, yeah. And so I really didn't find it unusual that he was doing that. It just made me think that's the kind of light that he already had, he was comfortable with using, and that's what he went with.
What about the fact, I've always thought it was odd that he chose a backpack with reflective tape. Here you are in a light pollution free zone, and that Nest camera is going to emit at least some light, and then you're using a light, and now you're lighting up like a little Christmas tree on the sides. Did you just think that that was just a mistake?
What it made me think of is that he just didn't consider the reflective material on the backpack. Most of the reflective material on backpacks, when you first look at it in the light, you really don't notice it because it's kind of subdued or muted until light hits it. Uh, and so, do you remember back in the 90s when they came out with shoes that illuminated when you walked and ran?
Yes.
Well, I absolutely love that because there was a lot of bad guys who would go and commit crimes and then run from us, and they'd be wearing those shoes. And it's not that they thought, oh, these shoes aren't going to light up, when I'm running from the police. It's just something that they didn't consider when they made that purchase or put them on that day. He just didn't think about, oh, when I'm carrying this backpack, the reflective material is going to show and may, alert people to my location or whereabouts. And to me, it's like the kids that wore the illuminated shoes while, they're out there committing burglaries. The shoes were just so much a part of their life that they didn't even think about them when they went to do their thuggish acts.
So, in your experience, do individuals who commit these types of crime, do they buy a whole outfit and get all ready, or do they already have these items usually?
Well, I worked a number of kidnappings, but none of them were like this. Uh, and the kidnappings that I worked were usually they weren't completely or thoroughly investigated because usually as soon as we started to investigate them, the person who was kidnapped was released and the family didn't want to participate in the investigation because it usually had something to do with people owing money to drug dealers and people getting kidnapped and being held until the money's paid up for the debt owed. Uh, I personally never investigated a kidnapping like this where it was truly for ransom. But I would guess that most people who go and commit these types of crimes, they already own those types of pants, those shirts, that holster, everything that they're using, except for what's in the backpack is stuff they already have, except for maybe the ski mask.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on this. I don't think he went out and appareled himself for this. I think this is what he was comfortable with. And like you said, even that backpack, something he just had and didn't even think about the reflection of that straps. What about, so the night of this, the first, basically in those hours, there was a full moon, and the actual moon illumination was described as 100% illuminating. And this, of course, was a light pollution-free area, which we've talked a lot about. I used to live in one in Westlake, Texas. It's amazing because you look up and it's Dances with Wolves sky. And when the moon would come out, it would be like a flashlight onto everything. And I just noticed in this background, and I want to talk to you about comparing another picture, but in this background, you see how light it is in the background. Did you
Yes.
notice that? Did you think that had anything to do with the Ring camera, or I'm sorry, the Nest camera, or his light, or just that was the luminescence in the background?
I thought that it probably had more to do with the light amplification from the recording device.
Interesting. So I want to bring your attention, and I know you've heard about this. This was released at the exact same time by Kash Patel of the video of that night. And I want to talk to you about it because there's been so much speculation. My issue about a lot of the speculation that it kind of matched up to was this darkness. So basically, you can see similarities. The differences are, of course, in this picture, he has a holster and a gun. And in this picture, and a holster and a gun. In this picture, sorry, let me get you to the right one I wanted to ask you about. In this picture, no holster, no gun. He has different shoes on. You can sort of see a mark. The background sky is so much darker. There's been a lot of speculation about the height of this person compared to the other person. So, of course, the three running ideas are this is the same day he came up to the door and, was looking around, but until he decided to go, he didn't put on his backpack, his holster, his gun. Second line of thought is this is a secondary person that they decided to dress alike for this, as we've seen in many crimes. And then the third idea, and this is what sources are telling people, is no, this is a completely different day. Any thoughts?
It could be a different day because of the lack of illumination in the background. I would think that it's a totally different day. Or do we know if the video that we see with Backpack Guy, if that's been enhanced by the FBI or the sheriff's office?
So the reason I don't believe it was enhanced is we got this on day 10, but of course the Bureau wasn't involved until day 3, so they wouldn't have begun the project. Initially, the sheriff said there's no way, there's no footage, we don't have any, and then the Bureau came in and worked with Google, and they unmasked this because, of course, she didn't have a subscription. So my question, or my belief, is that because they said they gave it to us, I think within 2 hours, but few hours, no way did Quantico have a chance to do their magic. So I don't think this is at all enhanced. I think these are pre-Quantico.
Okay.
So when I look at this picture, though, I wanted to pull this up. See how much darker, though, that background is in this picture?
Yes.
Versus the other picture I showed. And again, I didn't enhance any of these. I literally just went on to what Kash Patel sent out, downloaded that video, took screenshots. I didn't do any amplification because I'm just not that good and don't know how. So this is directly from that. And then I thought it was interesting. This again is the same time, but now it's dark in the back. So I wondered if it could just be the video quality in photos that we got.
Well, it could be that, but also when you've been using your phone to record things, haven't you noticed that at times when you're going to record somebody in your house and it's a little dark, depending on where the person moves relative to the recording device and the light source, that it can appear lighter or darker in the whole image? And it could just be that. Did I
Did
say
it?
that? Did I say that clearly?
Yes, I totally
Okay.
understand, because for me, for this guy to come up here, and I actually want to talk to you about the third scenario as well. But if this is him on a different day, the thought of him risking, first of all, this is as high risk almost as you can get in terms of getting caught. I know you saw the video. He's literally sauntering around as if not
Yes.
a care in the world. I want to talk about why he would do that. But I also want to talk about, are you really going to risk on a separate day going up to this Ring camera, getting this close to the house, knowing you're going to be captured and not disabling it?
Or it could have been a dry run just to see what happens if he does go up there. He doesn't have any of his tools or his backpack. So if he's confronted by law enforcement because somebody does call on him, he can say, "Man, I'm just out walking. I'm not up to, anything." And law enforcement can't show that any crime's been committed or is going to be committed, so they have to release him. So it could have been just him going up there just to see if there's any alarms, anything that's going to happen inside the house that's going to alert somebody that makes them call the police. And it could very well be that, which is why he was there for so long, just walking around.
So, of course, to me, though, that mask, I would be, if I'm inside, and by the way, something similar to this just happened to my daughter, but I would be concerned. Of course, I have a gun, so, you know, I'm not I'm not an 84-year-old woman with a heart condition who's extremely frail, can't walk very far. If I see this in my Nest camera on, any day, I would be calling 911. Of course, obviously, this shows me she didn't see this. Either she didn't have her phone on or the notifications coming through, which could be. But I just thought it was so risky to me. I get site surveys, and so many do recon before a situation, but to come right up here on the porch, I'm just not convinced it was a second day. Do you lean more one way or the other?
I would put it more in the site recon realm, whether it was the day before, the day of, but I believe that he actually went up there without any of his other gear, without his gun, without his backpack, just to see if there would be a response. And the mask was on just because, in case there was a recording, his face was still covered. And if the police showed up, and found him, well, it's not illegal to have a mask. And they
So,
wouldn't have anything to hold him on.
so you think it's probably a completely different day in part because of this?
The difference in lighting, the difference in attire. I mean, it looks like he's got a different top on. I don't think he would have swapped out tops if it was the same day.
What about the idea, Dale, that this is an accomplice on the same day? And I'll draw your attention to, I'll just mention one case, although I have about 5 cases that I've researched, the Hollywood bank robbers that always dressed alike, Klebold and Harris Younger,
Yeah.
so that anonymity exists. And I was going to ask you, did you ever see that in any, because you worked robberies forever, did you ever see the thugs dress alike so that you couldn't really tell later on who did what?
No, the only thing that might be even similar to that, it was just a lot of them would wear black just because it doesn't stand out. Uh, and that was it. I never saw anybody purposely say, hey, we all dressed alike, so you couldn't tell who was who and who was doing what. yeah, we were all there, but you don't know which of those guys is me because we're all dressed alike.
I've seen a few cases like that. I was curious if you ever saw anything like that. I
No.
want I want to get to, so basically out of the three choices, you're going with different day. And I wanted to talk to you too about source reporting. I've been pretty tough on source reporting, not because of the reporters, because they're doing their job. They're supposed to be trying to get law enforcement to cough up clues. But what's been your experience as somebody who's working these homicide detective or leads for 10 years, and then you watch TV and the reporter says, and according to source report, are they usually right or are they usually wrong?
Uh, in my experience, at least, the few times the press was interested in any of my cases, they had it wrong, and it was more, I think, them speculating and saying that they had a source. Uh, and with a lot of the source reporting that I've seen related to this, I think they might be talking to somebody who is somehow related to the investigation, but that person's really not giving them anything of any real importance. But the media just feels they have to report on something, so they take the little bit of information that they have, maybe enhance it and make it sound bigger than what it really is and report it. But it's probably nothing to do with any real useful evidence or information that they have, because that would compromise the whole thing.
Yeah, I've been struggling because this, and I'm part of the media now. This case, though, has more source reporting than any case I've ever seen. Even in the Idaho 4 case, you never had this. In the student murder cases, where literally I can watch one report by one investigator says according to their sources, and then I can watch another one that says according to their, and they're polar opposite sourcing. And then I'm thinking, how can there be like 20 sources? Is everybody in law enforcement just corrupt? And
No, I think a lot of it are reporters who hear rumors and decide to say that they have a source who fed them that information just so that they have something to say on camera, just to keep interest and to keep the focus on their reporting, which is why you have different information coming from people that are sometimes polar opposites. So with a lot of the information that's coming out, I I I don't think a lot of it's credible, because in essence, really isn't this all we know? We know she's missing. We know the time frame that she was taken, from her house. We know that there's blood. We know that the blood is hers. And we know what time her pacemaker was stopped communicating with her phone and transmitting information. And other than that, what do we really know about this case? Those are the hard facts. We know that there's a lot of speculation based on the gloves that were found miles from the location. The one I know that has been analyzed has, been shown to belong to somebody that's totally unrelated to the case. We know that all the speculation about the involvement of the family members has been disproven, and that the family has essentially, through various methods, been cleared. And so when it comes right down to it, really, yeah, all we know is what you're showing there. The,
yeah,
the,
I
what
think
I would like to see is, and to me, what's most interesting is the DNA mixture with Miss Guthrie's blood. I am just so curious as to whether or not that mixture is going to end up being with her and a suspect, or her and just another random person that may have been in her house to do a repair or a delivery or something else.
Now, Dale, I have to say, so on the 2nd of March, Sheriff Nanos gave an interview to NBC, and there was a lot of information that he kind of discussed. And part of that information was the DNA sample. And he, for the first time, he said it's more than 2 profiles, multiple profiles. So that was the first I had heard that. And I don't think anyone has ever said it's mixed with Nancy's.
Okay. Uh, I would love to know what object that DNA profile or those DNA profiles were found on. Was it something that almost anybody who would visit the house would come into contact with that object, or something specific that they knew that the suspects would have touched or sweat on or bled on or done something with? Because we know that at least when they went in, or he went in, uh, they were wearing gloves. So it's probably not going to be, handler DNA. It's going to be something else, because if you can say that the DNA profiles that they found, were definitely handler DNA, then I would say more than likely that's from somebody who's not the suspect, because we know the suspects, when they entered, were wearing gloves and probably kept them on during the whole course of the offense.
What about, though, and I want to bring this picture up, what about things like mustache hair or eyebrows, that were shown, or we talked about the saliva from that, if he took it out of his mouth and then he touched
Set it down.
or set it down, or even now he's got the saliva possibly on the glove, and then he later touches that glove to something.
That's
I
a
was
good point.
thinking about those types of things, and that might lend itself to more having multiple profiles, because other people could have touched that flashlight. That just is something that came to my mind.
No, you're on the right track. Like I said, if it's handler DNA, then I would probably think that that's not it. But like I said, if it's saliva or blood or something that the suspect may have left there by means other than touch, then that's a good clue. And what was the object found on?
Well, I think it's sort of bad information from the standpoint of, according to uh, the sheriff's office or the sheriff himself. And for me, as somebody who covers these cases, my number one go-to, the number one source is what law enforcement says. I have to sort of be able to trust this, but in this case, the sheriff has done, let's just say, a problematic job as messaging, because he's all over the board too. He initially came on and said, Dale, this specificity, we were called out to Nancy Guthrie's house Saturday night. He specifically says Saturday. He specifically says night. And only our officers reported. And then later said, that everybody reported Sunday afternoon after she missed church, who she watched church with friends after COVID at a private home, and they reported she didn't come as usual. So the reporting's been difficult. What do you think about that? What, in your experience with the department, do you think these are just miscues by him?
I do. I do. Because, what do we know? We know when she was dropped off. We know when the garage door went down. I believe it was the garage door. We know when the call was made after she missed uh, logging on to the video to watch her church service, and when officers were called out to the scene on a welfare check for her. So I think a lot of that just has to do with the sheriff not being given good information or not listening carefully before he gets on the camera to the people who are giving him the information.
One of the things that the sheriff said in the very earliest interview, it might have been number one or number two, uh, he almost broke down crying. He was definitely emotional on the brink of tears. Um, because they were talking about whether this was really a homicide, and he called homicide detectives out at the very beginning, minute one. So it wasn't something that it was an afterthought. It happened right away. And but then if you juxtapose that with what we just heard from him, he says he still thinks she's alive. What are your thoughts on whether she could be alive? We're on day 37, I believe. What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, one, I believe he probably would have called in the homicide unit, not necessarily because he thinks that she's deceased, but those are usually where you have your most experienced detectives, your true go-to guys, the ones who have already worked their way through the robbery unit, the kidnapping unit, the assault unit, and they have all of the experience that they can bring together to do these very difficult and time consuming investigations. So, him bringing in homicide right away, it just makes sense that that's what he would do, especially in a high profile case like this. Uh, and whether or not I believe that she's alive after this much time has passed, I look at it this way: she's an 84-year-old woman. She's frail and has medical conditions. She's probably on a lot of different medications. And with all of the trauma and stress that it shows that she went through, uh, I believe that there's at least a strong possibility that she is no longer here, which is why you haven't seen anybody make further ransom demands and say, listen, here's proof of life. Send the money to this location or, to this account and you can have her. I think if she was alive, you would have seen some proof of life from the kidnappers.
So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's actually throughout the United States a group of Chilean thieves, robbers, burglars. I'm going to call them burglars because that's what they are. They go in when you're not there, which is what burglars do, right? They don't want confrontation. And this band, actually, the FBI arrested 7 of them throughout the United States that were targeting Mahomes and Kelsey and all of these high profile professional athletes, and uncovered basically this huge ring. And I just thought it was interesting. I'm not trying to draw the fact that this is part of this, because if you're a Chilean burglar and that's what you do, you're not going to all of a sudden switch to abductions, I don't think. But it was interesting. This is some of the footage from a ring camera from one of the heists. And I just thought the reflective backpack, the way they were dressed, it just drew my attention to, I guess, sort of the normalcy of what people would dress like to go in and commit these crimes. Thoughts on that?
No, but I will say this. Everyone thinks that burglars are nonviolent people. Uh, those people, I think, have been misinformed. Uh, when people, especially when they're talking about gun rights and the right to self-defense, and they say, well, if an intruder breaks into my home, I want to have a gun, to defend myself. And then there's usually a person that says, well, burglars are nonviolent people. They just want to get in, get the stuff, and get out. I have found in my experience that burglars are extremely violent people. And if they come across somebody in the house, especially an elderly person, they will more often than not beat that person and tie them up and leave them for dead as to not. When I was in the robbery unit, I had several cases that were coughed up to me from the burglary unit because there was somebody home. And in all those instances, the person was beaten, if not to death, nearly to death. So anyone who says that a burglar is a nonviolent person is just very misinformed.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and I talked about this on one of my previous shows, but in the Virgin Islands, we lived in a community of about 10 houses, very spaced out. You couldn't even see your neighbors at all. And in that community, there was a neighbor, not when I lived there, prior to me living there, that was robbed. It's actually a very famous case because there ended up being a regatta named after him. But nevertheless, he and his wife were away. And they came back that night to see these burglars, two of them, loading up stuff in their car. And so when they pull up, they immediately abandon what they're doing, get in their car and start driving away. Well, the husband drops the wife off, tells her to call 911, and he chases after him. He chases after him. He gets about maybe a mile, and they pull over because he's screaming and having them pull over. I mean, you know, in the Virgin Islands, it's two-way traffic. Everybody goes 25 miles an hour because you can't go faster than that. Pulls over, goes up to the window, and the burglar takes his gun out and shoots him, kills him right there. And to your point, when things break bad and they do confront people, I think that this is more the norm than the not, even if they're masked.
Yes, especially like in the circumstance that you're talking about. Uh, that person probably knew, okay, that guy's probably on the phone calling the police, telling them where I am. I'm just going to take him out because that way, when the police finally get here, you know, I won't be being followed anymore and they won't know who I am or where I went.
You
So,
know, too, we talked about a case that's going on right now in South Carolina that a friend of mine is working because, of course, you know, I've been cutting this case up with you and other detective seasoned guys. And it's an 80-year-old, because I was looking for cases that were similar. 80-year-old
oh, I
woman.
bet you they're hard to find.
They're hard to find. But this one is an 80-year-old woman, but it's so much different. It's the guy that stole a church van. The van breaks down, and now he needs another car, so he breaks into this woman's house to steal her car, but she kills him. So he sits and has some pizza, some of her pizza. He was there for an hour. Now he's not masked, takes her with him, drives from South Carolina to North Carolina and back, and then shoots her in the back of the head behind a grocery store. It was a grocery store. Now, like, you know, to your point, I think once they get up against a corner, they're ready to do it.
Yeah. Even car thieves become violent. People think, oh, car thieves aren't violent. One of the one of the cases that I worked that was actually on the first 48 involved a small gang of thugs from North Dallas who went to the Harry Hines area, uh, went to steal a brand new Durango. And as they were driving off in the Durango, they realized that there's an intoxicated man sleeping in the back seat. And it was the nephew of the owner of the vehicle who had left the party that they were at nearby and just went into the vehicle and fell asleep. And when the bad guys realized that he was there, rather than throw him out of the car or, you know, ditch him someplace, they just turned around and shot him and killed him. And then they realized, okay, we just killed this guy in this vehicle. I guess we can't have the car anymore. And they got out of the car and fled in the vehicle that originally brought them to the offense location. And just stupid people doing stupid things that result in these horrific tragedies. Well, they're not really tragedies, they're crimes.
They're crimes. Uh, Dale, so did you get to interview them or any other
Yes.
burglars? I want to hear what they had to say about why they made the decision.
Well, this group of guys, uh, they had been terrorizing this neighborhood in the North Dallas area for weeks. They'd been doing a bunch of carjackings. The suspect vehicle that they ended up fleeing with, they had taken in a from a home invasion earlier that day, and they were just doing what was to them routine, just engaging in random acts of thuggery. You know, they were going around committing burglaries, committing robberies. To them, you know, when they went to the Harry Hines area and saw a vehicle that they decided that they could steal or wanted to steal, you know, they thought nothing of it. The only complication was is, oh, there's a drunk guy passed out in the back seat. So they ended up, you know, just killing him because they thought that would be the easiest way to solve that problem. And then they realized they created a bigger problem and couldn't keep the car that they just stole. So they dumped out the body and abandoned the Durango at the same location as the body, and then fled in the gray Infinity, which is why every time I see Infinities, I wonder if it's a bad guy driving it.
So, so when we get back to the whole idea, though, of them taking her, have you ever had a case, a burglary slash robbery case, where they killed the person and decided to keep the body with them?
Never, never, ever, ever. And there's only a couple of cases that were mine where they even moved the body from one location to another, but it was only because when they committed the murders, they they were in a vehicle and just had to get rid of the body. Uh, the only the only time that I actually saw somebody remove a body from a crime scene was I was actually in patrol, and there was a home invasion of a dope house, and the suspects went in there and killed like 3 or 4 people, and then loaded up the bodies and dumped them off in a small wooded area in West Dallas. It was maybe half a mile from the offense location. And the detectives never told me why the suspects removed the bodies and drove them away. But that was the only incident that I can think of where somebody removed bodies, and it was multiple bodies from a crime scene.
Because it causes, now you've just brought the crime with you. I mean, your risk level and your
Yes.
it's just completely gone up. And so is that part of the reason that you surmise that this is a abduction that was meant to be abduction from the word go?
Oh, I think that there's no doubt that this was meant to be an abduction from the very beginning. And I think it's an abduction that just didn't go the way the abductors thought it would.
Yeah, I'm so back to Occam's razor. There's another theory I do want to cut up with you that is, you know, a lot of people putting a lot of credence into it. It's way down at the bottom for me. I've said 20%. It's dwindling down to about 3%, if that, but just something to consider. But that theory, of course, is that, and I'll put her back up on stage, that, of course, this is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, who, for people who watch news and bring uh, these daytime shows into their house. I mean, they're so personal. I had a famous profiler. He was the first with John Douglas profiler for the FBI. I've been in the business, I don't know, 40, 50 years. He's one of my mentors. And he said that those daytime shows, they're so personal how they talk. And I've been showing a lot of clips for my audience up at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, every night. Just these clips showing how personal, like she unloads her purse and goes through every single thing in her purse and just, come into my home, come see my mom, come see our favorite Mexican restaurant. Like they just so open them, as opposed to the nightly news that's about news. That this is so different. And a lot of people are at least wondering about, and I wondered about it too, is this like a John Hinckley? In other words, somebody, and again, this is so far off of Occam's razor, which is not my MO.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to say, no, I don't think it's that at all, because most of those guys want to become known. They want the person whose attention they get to see them and to think about them and know that this was done because of them or for them. And you don't have that here.
Yeah, I also showed, I mean, I agree with you. And then also when you combine that with, in these instances, that they actually target the person, they really want the person to be affected in whatever way. I showed a case
Yes.
about this woman named Bjorn. I don't know if you know this case. She's a very famous Swedish, I think she's Swedish. And that guy felt like he wasn't getting the attention he wanted, big fan mail and everything. And I guess fan mail wasn't being answered to how he wanted it. And he turned his back on her and sent her a letter bomb with cyan or some sort of acid. So it would blow up and ruin her face, not necessarily kill her, but ruin her face. It was thwarted. But I mean, I could case after case after case where they want that person to suffer. I don't know that 84-year-old mom really fits into that.
Well, if they wanted her to suffer, they could have kidnapped her mom, but then they would have probably let them know it's me that did it.
Yeah.
Or let them know the reason why.
I like where you're going with that. I want to talk a little bit about this, three things in this picture. Number one, the doormat. So as you may know, there were 4 crime scene investigations. The first one was done by Pima County. It lasted 20 hours, Sunday to Monday.
That's an incredibly long time to process a scene.
The second one was started after day 3 when the FBI got involved. And by the way, nothing after the scene was left. It was just left, just to let you know. On day 3, the Bureau came in. They did their investigations with ERT. Then several days later, they went back and decided to take her car, and they didn't see a Ring camera or a Nest camera video that was on the roof. So they went back and took that. And then the fourth one, law enforcement went back again and searched the septic tank. They had like this pool rod or something poking around in there. It's like, you got to drain it, because what if they just threw an indicia of the crime? My question to you is, and I know you and I both hate to lop on and second guess and armchair quarterback, but they didn't take any of the shrubbery, Dale, and they didn't take the mat. I want to talk to you about this whole crime scene thing.
Okay, I would have had the mat seized. And the reason why I would have had the mat seized is you might have had more droplets of blood that were found on there. There might have been secretions or stuff from the bad guy on there. And I would have taken the pieces of shrubbery on there, just because when he pulled on the shrubbery, those gloves are not very tough, and it's very likely that there was a small hole that was created in the glove when you're pulling that shrubbery out, where you might be able to like swab it all and get some handler DNA. It's a long shot, but yeah, sometimes that's all you have, and you have to be thorough because you only get. Uh, when I was at the one and only homicide investigation class that I ever went to, one of the things that they emphasized over and over and over is you only get one good shot at a crime scene. Make sure it's done right, make sure it's done thoroughly, because if you have to go back, nothing's the same.
Right. Nothing's the same because the whole family was, I mean, people were in there.
Yes.
All the investigators were in there. All the people, when they thought she was just missing, was in there.
Yeah.
And
And also think about this, going back to your drool theory, what are the chances that there was drool and it landed on that carpet at the front mat?
yeah, it's
Because you and I both know when you hold something in your mouth, because I'm sure that I'm not the only one who's had a small flashlight in my mouth, late at night as I'm trying to do something, and you do drool a lot of times when you do that, or you sneeze. And when they examine that carpet, they could see that there's biological material on there, then find, oh, it's not her blood, it's something else, and have that possibly linked to a suspect. I know that's a lot of what ifs and a lot of conjecture, but now you don't have that opportunity to pursue those possible leads because you didn't grab the evidence.
well, and I don't know about you, but my mantra was always I, I I would rather be lucky than good, meaning luck in so many of my cases ended up solving the case, ended up getting the bad guys, especially on fugitive investigations and things like that. Just, I'll give you a quick example. These, the main characters in a big Medellin cartel case that we had taken down, we had to take it down because the informant that was compromised. Anyway, we indicted 48 people, and the main bad guys that would come in from Cali and Medellin got away. And we thought we'll never see them again. Months later, I just heard rumors on the streets through different sources I had that they were back in town. And so I just went to their normal haunts. Like I would just go there. Oh, I think I'll just go check it out. Check it out. For weeks, I did that. And I don't know why. And then all of a sudden, I pull up and they're there. It was unbelievable. I was so lucky. And how many cases have you had like that? Where, in other words, we talk about the chances being slim, but they're there. You have to explore them with the mat
Oh,
and the shrubbery.
well, one, there's a lot of physical evidence detectives that did not like coming to my scenes because I was known as a trash collector. If something was there, whether they thought it was trash or not, I wanted it collected just because I didn't know what was going to be of evidentiary value and what was not. So I always thought it was much safer to have it so it can be processed later than to not have it at all and lose that opportunity. But you talk about luck and just showing up places. There was a couple of times when I was a robbery detective and I would go out to locations to look for like cameras that may have been overlooked by patrol to see if there's some kind of video evidence of the offense. And while I'm walking around, looking for evidence, there's my suspect. And next thing you know, I'm getting into a foot chase and fights, and but it's only because you go the extra mile. Okay, somebody's already done this, well, I'm going to go make sure that not only did they do their job right and that they didn't overlook anything. And by trying to be thorough, sometimes you get lucky
Yeah.
and you stumble across the bad guy or a piece of evidence that was missed. And, oh God, uh, there there was this was actually really bad. I was assisting another detective on a murder, and he got a search warrant for this house where he thought his suspect was. So we get some patrol guys and we all go out to this house in South Dallas, and we're beginning, the search of the house for the suspect. And as I'm standing outside of this room, I see this patrol officer go into a bedroom and then come out a few seconds later. And I thought, wow, I don't know what he looked for in there, but he didn't look very hard. And I asked him if he, what'd you find in there? He said, oh, it's just an empty bedroom. Well, I went back into that bedroom, and as I'm looking around, I looked under the bed and walk over to the closet, pull the closet open, and there's this big pile of clothes. And I thought, well, someone could be hiding in there. And so I gave the big pile of clothes a good swift kick and heard somebody say, ow.
Oh my gosh. And there he was.
There she was. It was a female suspect.
Yeah.
It was a female suspect.
I just totally agree with you on everything. Take more, because you just never know, and you have one shot at it. I want to go through this really quickly, this blood, and that's a funny story. That's really a funny story. I have a similar story with somebody being in insulation in an attic, and I thought there was
Yeah, we've all had to go up into attics and poke around in the insulation. I hate blown insulation to this day because of that.
Well, I had to do it because when it came to crawl spaces and attics, I'm the smallest, and they just throw me up there and hoist me up rather than these big guys here up there. I always said, I joked around, if they could have put the limit and I would have agreed to it, and they could have used me as a battering ram, they would have done it, because, just whatever you were useful for. Anyway, not exactly that situation. I saw the hump, and of course, I didn't think it was anything. I have done a million attic searches, never had it be anybody, but I said, FBI, I see you. And all of a sudden they jump up. I was like, no, I really didn't see you. But, I saw a minor hump, kind of very similar to that story.
Yeah, I don't know why those things make me laugh.
Well, I always say, and I don't know if you agree or if you're even a Pulp Fiction fan. Have you ever watched Pulp Fiction?
The movie Pulp Fiction? Yes. Yeah.
I don't know what your thought. You and I we've talked about a lot of things. We've never talked about Pulp Fiction, but I always say that is the most realistic from this standpoint, that for bad guys, things like murder and brains and guts and all that and shooting, it becomes normal. And that's just like, oh man, you clean it up. You're the one that had the AD, they don't have that Kansas accent, but you know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. There was a murder that I worked where the bad guys tried, they used a shotgun in this dope house where they killed a guy who they didn't know, but they thought he may have shorted them on a little bit of the crack on a hand-to-hand delivery. And so they found him in his house and used a shotgun to voice their displeasure, and his brains and head went flying everywhere inside the bathroom. And they went to try to clean up the crime scene using CLR, but I know, and to this day I can't look at a CLR bottle without thinking of that. But also, to them was just perfectly normal. Let's see, we want to clean up this scene so they don't know we killed this guy in here. And 5 minutes into trying to clean it up, they realize that the task is bigger than what they expected, and they just left.
Yep. I have talked about this a couple of times, and I want to get your take on the fact that they were there for somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. I mean, the number that people like to use is the the ring camera was disengaged at 1:47 at 2:28. So they do the math and they say about 41 minutes or so. But I'm not sure that that is exactly right. I think they could have possibly been in there longer because I believe, and I want to get your opinion, that there were more than one suspect involved and that the suspect who entered from the back and who took control of her let the suspect in from the front, and his job was to disable the camera. So when they took her out, which because it would be the shortest version, right? This is a big house, meaning it's spread out. It's on about an acre of land. There's a cabana, a pool, and to take her all the way around, I don't think they wanted to risk that. So they took that. But anyway, that's just my hypothesis of what happened. I want to ask you, do you think there was more than one person? What would they have done in the house for 41 minutes plus? And then also, in past cases, I look at the Manson cases, they cut their people up and back to our point, and then sat around and raided the icebox and ate. And the case I told you about of the 80-year-old in South Carolina, that guy decided to raid her icebox and have some pizza. Do you think eating could have been involved here? I'm just trying to figure out what they did for all that time.
If I were to guess, I would say no. The fact that he had a stuffed backpack when he showed up showed that there was planning and forethought. Whether he was alone or not, we don't really know. It makes more sense that there was an additional person just because it's easier to control somebody, even if it's an elderly woman, especially if you might have to carry her if there's at least two of you. But because you can see that there was at least some planning and forethought, that they would probably try to get in and out of there as reasonably as quickly as possible and wouldn't linger longer than what they had to.
Yeah,
But
it seems like such a long time. As you know, that's an eternity.
that is longer than an eternity when you're engaged in a high stress event.
We talk a lot about the Brian Koberger, the student murders, and he was in and out in under 15 minutes, murdered 4 people. And I've always said in that case, that was an eternity.
That's actually a very long time.
It's a super long time. It takes seconds with a K-bar knife and sleeping people, other than Xana, to kill them. Back to this blood spatter before I keep getting off, and I need to respect your time. We've talked a little bit about whether this was aspirating blood by her, which I've always said too. I think they would have gagged her. They're not going to toss her in the car alive and risk her screaming or making noises, especially if they were get pulled over. But tell me about what you see in this blood.
Okay. When I look at that blood, one, I wish there was a better, more clear photo of it. But to me, I don't believe that it's aspirated blood just because you can tell that she was held basically in the same spot long enough for her to have droplets of blood fall off from her head, her hand, or whatever, long enough to create all of the big drops. And the big drops show that they have almost no motion. They look like just regular drops that would just fall off a part of the body and land. Yeah, like that.
Yeah, this
And
is some pictures of the blood drops, not this from this scene, showing how when a blood drops, even just a direct drop, it spatters out exactly like what
yes,
you see there.
yeah, but you can also tell that with the main droplet, there's not a lot of motion because when you have motion in a blood drop, like there's like somebody's moving or the blood is moving because of a blow or a strike, there's a tail to it, and there's no tail on that.
Right. Yep.
And also all the little droplets are almost evenly distributed going out from the center of that droplet that you showed. And that is what I think I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
So, but what's surprising to me is, you know, based on the size of the blood drops there, she was there more than just a few seconds. And it's like, why was she being held there to bleed in that spot for more than a few seconds? Because you'd think that they would have, once she was outside, literally whisked her away.
I surmised that she was being held there either in a fireman's carry or held like this, and that there was, and really, I'm not sure you can even hold like that, except for you know how when you have things in your hand, you're carrying them like this, or fireman's carry, and you
Yes.
reach back and try to close that door. And remember, there were two doors on that porch area. And I just wondered if she was in that spot. And by the way, we both agree this is so hard to hold somebody in this sort of position that is, just say 150-ish pounds. Wow, that's a lot for one person to manage.
Yeah, and one of the things that surprises me is there's no smearing of the blood because of something being dragged or stepped on, with the blood, which means, their feet were well to the side of it, which, indicates to me, one, she could have been being carried and held, which is why there's no footprints or smears in the blood because her head is off to the side. Or if she was walking herself, her head is probably being held down and pushed to the side while, she's bleeding the drops out and the bad guys are doing whatever they're doing behind her.
Right. Dale, I missed one thing. You had started to talk about it, and then I meant to go back to it because I really wanted to get your opinion, and now I've forgotten. Uh, was there anything else you wanted to add while I contemplate what it is that I really wanted to ask you about something you mentioned earlier?
I wish I did. The only thing that I think that we really haven't discussed is the Wi-Fi jammer that some people think was used.
Yes. Talk to me about your experience. Yep, there it is. That's the one. Uh, you read my mind. It's like a Jedi mind you're doing on me.
The only thing that I think about when I heard that there might be a Wi-Fi jammer being used is I have no personal experience with them. But there was a rookie that I trained who had spent a couple of tours in Afghanistan who was talking about how there was a bunch of people in the Marines that had gotten cancer, and those were usually the guys who, while they were in Afghanistan, had carried what they called the bubble, which was some kind of Wi-Fi backpack portable Wi-Fi jamming device, where when they're carrying it, it would disable or scramble the signals that might be going to a roadside bomb that somebody might use a cell phone to detonate. And so if a Wi-Fi jammer was used, it's either, I think it opens up the possibility that the person at least has some military experience with those types of devices, or a techie guy who just knows about those devices.
Yeah, look. I just can't believe a jammer was used, in my opinion, because of the distance involved. I mean, 20 to 30 feet, maybe, unless somebody could get some really, like you said, a military grade. And even then, it's not, you have to be so close, and things like walls and other objects can cause issues with the jam. And the neighbor, and I have this really great picture I posted on Twitter, is so far away. This is her house, of course. I think it sits on about an acre, and her neighbor is so far away And then, of course, my bigger question, I've got two of them. If you were bringing a Wi-Fi jammer, first of all, why are all the images like this? In other words, the jammer sucked because we can see everything. Secondly, if you got a Wi-Fi jammer, why do you have to take the doorbell? Or I mean, I'm sorry, the Nest camera if you think your jammer is working. And two, it works on the same frequency as the uh, as her pacemaker. The Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, same frequency. So it jams a frequency. It doesn't jam one or the other. And
Yes.
so why do we have the disconnect at 228 and not at 147 when they first came up to the porch? So did they use it in the neighborhood? Maybe, perhaps concerned if there were multiple people. You'd have to now have all sorts of people in this conspiracy because they would have to be running around with this big jammer thing trying to jam video. And the other thing is the neighbor, at least through the reporting, says that it was all night. They lost it that night, all night. And
Okay. I'm going to tell you in the rural community that I live in, we frequently lose our internet. I mean, it's just something that happens. It might go down for a couple of minutes. It might go down for 15 or 20 minutes. And then I have to call my son, who's a techie kid, and ask him, hey, can you check to see if it's just our house that's being affected, or is there an outage in our area? And he usually can tell me quickly, oh, there's a outage with this provider in your area, so it's not just you. So if there was a signal lost, I know when you're in a somewhat rural area, it's easy to lose internet connections. But I think the sheriff's department or FBI, whichever one was doing it, was actually doing a good thing by then going house to house, having people check their devices to see if they did lose signal, and if so, when, because that would really give an indication as to whether or not there was a some kind of device being used. Because if it was just a regular outage, the provider could usually let you know, oh yeah, we had an outage in that area for 5 minutes because, like somebody hit a repeater tower, a mile away.
well, and I thought they might also be trying to check, the Bureau when they went out on this recanvass. First of all, I don't think there's any way in hell they're going to send everybody back out to do a recanvass for one question. I think this would have been part of more questions that were asked because have, I just wonder if they did a canvas like the Bureau normally does, which is where you get everybody together, meaning everybody that are your main detectives, and you say, come on, let's get the list together. Let's get all the questions we want to ask. You get them written up, and every detective, every gumshoe law enforcement person asks the same questions from the list you've put together from the brain trust so you don't miss anything. And this would have been an obvious question that should have been asked at the beginning, not at the end. It's just a normal question to ask because it also could explain why we don't have other footage from Nancy's house. And that's the slant I thought they were going, more than the thought of a jammer, was really more like, was there any sort of outage? Is that why we're missing the camera footage from the roof that they took? If they are, right? Because we haven't seen it. They haven't given
Yeah.
that to the public to help. That's the angle I thought they were looking at.
Yeah. But it's always good to go back and revisit willing witnesses to engage them in another conversation, because how how many times have you been at a gathering where somebody finds out that you're law enforcement and starts asking you for a good war story? But you can't think of any because to you, they're all pretty much the same. But you start talking to another officer who might be there, and all of a sudden, because of the conversation you're having, it stirs up other memories that you have, and all of a sudden you remember this bit of information that reminds you of this story, which leads to this story and getting out this other story. Well, it's the same thing with witnesses. When you go back and you revisit them and engage in a conversation with them, during that conversation about that event, you might stimulate something in their mind that hadn't come out before. So it's
Yeah.
always good to have people go back and revisit the witnesses, if anything, just to see if there's something that they now remember that they didn't before. And a lot of times the only way to get that information out is to stimulate their mind with conversations about that incident.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. I've been a little bit critical of it because this is the third canvas. So, but to your point, the more times you engage, what I always worry about is this: as a witness, say you have a witness that has really good information, like one of the witnesses said something about their dog alerted in and around this time. They provided that information on day 34. They didn't provide that information on day 1, apparently. So you have 3 different canvases and different information each canvas. Yes, I agree with you. You can kind of explain some of it, but when it's something big like that, like all of a sudden, yeah, my internet was down the whole night. And I just think that it can cause problems with the credibility of the witnesses you use
It
potentially.
can.
On that?
It can. I understand that point altogether, because you and I both know that the further you get away from a situation, the more opportunity there is for false memories to be created in somebody, especially if that witness has talked to other people about that subject and heard their stories, and purposely or not, sometimes their stories are incorporated into their own memories. And you always have to be careful of that. And if, God, I'm sorry, I'm remembering a case where that exact thing happened. But
Tell us.
going back to your,
Come on.
oh, okay. Are you familiar with the Lower Greenville area of
Oh,
Dallas?
yes. And I think
Okay.
we have a lot of Texas people in the audience, so they might also.
Okay. Well, there used to be a bar that catered to members of the Tango Blast down on Lower
Oh,
Greenville Avenue.
mhm.
And
That's
this,
a gang, everybody, not a rock group. Go ahead.
yeah, and this one kid got really drunk. He was a young Hispanic kid, wanders into that club right at closing time. And everyone in the club knows this kid isn't Tango Blast. And so a few people in the club start to beat him. And just because, he's not one of us and we want to have some fun, so we're going to have fun by beating this kid up. And the bouncers in the club see what's going on and throw all of them out into the street. And like I said, it's right at closing time anyway. And so when they're all tossed out into the street, the 3 people beating this kid continue to do it outside. And it's now in the street. There's a big circle of people watching, because some people like to watch other human beings being tortured and beaten. And there's a bunch of 911 calls that are now coming in, because there's rooftop bars up and down that street, and other people not involved are seeing it, and they're calling 911. And then a group of guys who knew the drunk kid who was getting beat walk up and see their friend getting beat. So they all go, "What's up, man? What's up?" And now the group of 3 beating this kid, no longer have a numerical advantage. So they start to walk away and are heading to their cars in the parking lot, because, oh, they already had their fun anyway. But while they're walking to their cars, the group of guys with the beat kid are walking to their cars, which happen to be in the same parking lot. And one of the Tango Blast guys think that they're being followed by these people and that they're going to try to shoot them. So he runs to his car, gets a gun, and shoots in the direction of the guy that they were beating, hitting him and killing another person who was just near him. Now, all of the witnesses who were good eyewitnesses at the time described the suspect as a Latin male, about 5'4", not wearing a shirt and having tattoos all over his body. And that's the suspect description that we had from that time from numerous people. So I'm pretty sure that that was a really good suspect description.
And
A week or two later, I finally develop enough information where I can identify and get an arrest warrant for the bad guy. And when the bad guy is arrested, they put his picture in the paper and they show him in the photo wearing a red hoodie. And if you were to look at him, you would, in the photo that was posted in the paper, he doesn't look Hispanic. He looked like a light-skinned black male. And like I said, there were a lot of people who dialed 911 who were watching this call. And as I'm going back through all of the call sheets related to this call, you know, I'm calling literally 100 or so people who dialed 911 to see if they saw anything. And when I talked to this one guy, I had listened to his 911 call, and his 911 call was almost exactly this. There's somebody shooting a gun. Okay, where is he? He's by this location on Lower Greenville Avenue. Okay, can you give me a description? No, I can't because I'm hiding behind a brick wall at the Taco Cabana. Okay, thank you very much. Click. When I called that person who made that call, when I spoke to him and asked him what he remembered from that night, he said, "Oh yeah, I saw the shooting." Okay, well, what did you see? Well, I saw a light-skinned black male wearing a red hoodie, standing by this corner and shooting a gun. Well, one, I knew it wasn't a light-skinned black male, wasn't wearing a red hoodie, but somehow his mind, after seeing that photograph, incorporated it into his memory, created a false memory, where now he remembers seeing a light-skinned black male at a totally different part of the parking lot, shooting a gun and hitting my suspect. And so I'm keenly aware of how fragile memories can be, and how, especially after a period of time, false memories can be created. By the way,
yeah,
that was actually a lot of fun testifying to on the stand, especially because the defense attorney thought he had a slam dunk, you know, thinking he's going to get this guy off because he's got an eyewitness who saw somebody totally different than his client do the shooting. And that was actually a lot of fun.
yeah. I mean, we see it all the time. The other thing we see, or I know you've seen, and that's such a perfect example, by the way, Dale, but is almost witnesses wanting to help, right? They want to provide information,
Yes.
they want to help, and then they start thinking, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I think my dog barked, at the exact time,
Yes.
because they have the time now. No, and maybe the dog did, but they didn't say it a month earlier. They say it now. And I don't
And it
think,
does call their credibility into question a little bit.
yeah, it can be problematic. All right, last question for you, Dale, because I know you have to go. Um, what do you think happened?
Well, kind of putting me on the spot there, aren't you?
I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay. I'm going to tell you this from the very get-go. I hate speculation. I always hated when I saw detectives go to a crime scene not having any real evidence that would lead them to believe a certain person committed the offense. And so in their mind, they're creating all of this scenarios, and then all of their energy is focused on proving their theory. I I dislike that. I like looking just at the evidence and letting the evidence just explain things. Sometimes you might not understand it at first, but usually, eventually, the evidence will speak for itself. But what do I believe is probably the most likely scenario here? I believe probably the most likely scenario is you have a person or persons who are probably, if not cartel, at least cartel related. And I only say that because most people who are engaged in criminal activity don't go around kidnapping people, especially elderly people, especially well-known people, because they know it's going to draw a lot of attention. But who does do that? People in the cartel or related to the cartel. And so you have probably cartel related people, and there's a good chance that one of them may have been told about, oh, I know this lady who's related to this famous person. She lives in this ritzy neighborhood. Maybe you can make a little money and give me a little kickback. And then the cartel related people who are used to doing kidnappings, either because they've done them themselves in the past or know people who have, decide, hey, this sounds like a good thing, let's go do it. So they create their little plans, get their little kidnapping kit together, and then go to Miss Guthrie's home.
Right.
I
So
think that's probably the most likely scenario that I can think of. Doesn't mean that that's what happened. If I'm proved wrong, am I going to be disappointed? No, because it's just a theory.
right. I mean, I'm 100% lockstep with you that it was an abduction that I think went bad. As far as cartel, I think we're thinking the same. Not the cartel, like it wasn't, the Jalisco cartel
Yeah,
saying
yeah, but cartel related people.
just pieces of crap that maybe at one point were gang thuggery, cartelish, and have either participated in or no. But I think they're U.S. citizens, likely. Maybe I'm not going to say U.S. citizens. I'm going to say U.S. living. I don't think they came across the border to do this. They live
Oh,
in two.
I totally agree with that because of the changes that's been made to the border area, and where the thugs no longer have free and easy access across the border like they used to. I think it may have been somebody who used to, work for the cartel, that used to be able to make a lot of money doing things going back and forth, and now is just on this side and isn't making the money that they used to. And this is what they considered an easy lick for a big payoff.
And then it all went wrong.
Yep.
Last question, I promise. So I promise, I'm going to make it so quick, Dale, because you're such a friend, but really quick. So I found where there were individuals it was 17, 18-year-old, 16, 17, it doesn't matter. They came from California, 6 hours plus away to Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona, because they were working with people, communicating with nicknames on Signal. And the actual people behind the whole case and they haven't been found, were the people on Signal. I think one of them was like Red and one of them was Dope, whatever these nicknames were. But
Please tell me they're Mr. Pink, Mr. Blue, Mr. Yellow.
Yeah, whatever.
By the way, I love that movie.
Some name. But they were directing this whole thing. They picked the target, which were people that were worth millions of dollars. And these two idiots who aren't at all sophisticated, they went in there, beat the hell out of this family, and demanded crypto in this ransom kidnapping type scheme. Obviously got caught. But I just wondered if there is any organized type of group that is actually working on getting, like you said, these peripheral thugs, like the 17 and 18-year-old thugs, at pointing out to them high dollar kidnapping potentials. And only in this case, they got a good group, a group that actually at least have evaded capture. Anyway, I just found that really interesting because of the proximity, because there was somebody deep behind it that could be thugs. You know what I mean? Or why else would they
Yeah.
do that?
That is as much within the realm of possibility as anything else. But if I were working that case, one of the things I would do if I was comparing it to the Guthrie case is I would see if there's any similarities, because most of these people, once they're used to doing things a certain way and getting away with it, they're going to continue doing it the same way because it works. And they're not going to change the way they communicate or the people they use or anything else because they want to stick with what works. And so I would be curious to know how similar or dissimilar this case is that you described from the Guthrie case.
Yeah. It's just something I'm kind of watching because, like you said, how often do you have strangers going in and trying to kidnap rich people? Just, it's a very unusual.
Yeah,
And
and especially that one. Why would they do her?
yeah,
That's why I believe that they're in the most likely scenario that I can create in my head is that somebody somehow who's related to these thugs let them know, hey, there's this lady whose daughter is famous and she's got a lot of money. She lives in this rich neighborhood. And if you can do this, you might be able to make a big payday, and just share some of it with me for giving you the info.
yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Dale, thank you. I kept you over your time, I'm afraid. I don't know what time we're at. Oh my gosh, I've got to let you go, Dale. You were so engaging. You're so wonderful. Please promise you'll come back again on another case because you're amazing.
I will. I appreciate your time, Jen. It was great talking to you.
Great talking to you. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, Dale. Thank you.
Bye.
For the stage. You guys, the incomparable Dale Lumberg, he's great. I mean, you can see why 48 or the next 40 or the first 48, sorry, the first 48 had him on. He's a salty homicide guy, worked robbery before that. He has so many stories and so much information and so much intelligence in this types of situations to impart on us. I always say, no matter what you've done for a living, it doesn't matter whether you've taught or you cut hair or you were a mechanic, you become a master at your craft because of mistakes you've made and because of what I call time behind the tiller for any sailors out there, right? You have that time that you've done it over and over and you've made these mistakes and you see these same repetitions. And yeah, there's outliers in terms of diagnosing issues and figuring things out. But that's why I love to have seasoned guys on the show in all areas. And Dale's just really, he's the best. Everything he had to say was so interesting to me. And I really, really believe Occam's razor, this was a planned kidnapping gone bad. So anyway, still no Nancy Guthrie. We're on day, I believe, 37. Day 37. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. I know this is, I think, our longest show maybe ever. But until next time, mods, thank you so much for being on. Everyone, thanks for being here. And I can't wait to read your comments. Until next time, may justice be served for Nancy Guthrie and for everyone who's missing.